So lore. I have the siege, right? So the siege will wrap up the what is we used to call it Act One, now it's Chapter One. The essentially the introduction, of our story on Arrakis, and the ad starts in a moment, so I'm going to hold off. My only thing I need to kind of forewarn everybody on that is the audio sound. I had to make the video sound a bit loud in the video itself. So I ran it, I saved it, and then I run it through DaVinci to kind of make sure it's sort of clean. But then I had to kind of crank the audio up on that because I can't upload it to the software I usually use for this because it was too big. So I'm having to show you directly from my PC, so the sound might be a little off. So keep your hands ready you might have to turn it down a little bit because I cranked it up because I had my son help me test it. He's like, there's no sound. I'm like, ah. So I made the audio on the video a bit louder. So ads starting now. I'm going to wait a moment, and then we will look at the last part of Chapter One, Act One, whichever one you call it, and then then that first part will be all done, and we can kind of talk about what we know and who we know and how we know. There's I think Joel and his team spend a lot of time in this one showing off their nerd lore and how well they know the Dune universe, and things like learning the language and learning the importance of places and things that you don't go into much in like the movies, but you have to really kind of dig into the books really hard. All of the books, not just the six are good, but also Joel has dipped into like the house books because those things impacted the first book. How do we get to the first book? Well, stuff happened to Leto as young man, um, and all of those things impact what happened to get the current war where it is between Atreides and the Harkonnens. I mean, they've been at each other's throats for 10,000 years, and I always marveled, the idea that the idea, the Bene Gesserit wanted Jessica to have a girl so they could marry her off to Fayed, and that would somehow stop the war. And I'm like, you got 10,000 years of people hating each other, pretty sure. And 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 we know from this timeline, so she does have Ari, and she's supposed to marry Fayed. It's like, but we know enough about him. He kills people for sport. And there was the attack on Arakeen, although it wasn't successful. So you're going to marry her off to people who tried to wipe out your whole family. How I can't imagine Leto being super duper thrilled about that. I mean, Jessica seems pretty obedient to the Bene Gesserit, but I can't imagine Leto being really cool with, here, you tried to kill us all. We know you're horrible people, but here's my daughter. I just can't. I'm just not seeing it. It's not like Christopher Tolkien things. I got out of a waste back and printed this. I think it's got to be very complicated working from someone else's notes to the scale that they have. I know there's lots of controversy about whether Brian's work counts in the Dune universe. I know, like Veen was very vehement that he would never, ever, ever read the non-core books, the house books or anything like that, because they were written by Brian, and I respect that. But Joel has read them. I can guarantee Joel's read them, and those things will impact the story. So, and there are no happy endings here. We got a feudalism that's lasted 10,000 years. We've got a stagnant society that has lasted 10,000 years. We have this, it's still just as much. We got slavery. There's no happy ending here. It's just various shades of horrible. So, okay. Are we back from all the ads? I think the ads are over. Please tell me the ads are over. I think the ads are over. And let me see if I can do this. You might have to adjust the sound on your end. Let me make sure it's off on my end so we don't have any funky echoes. Tell us how you really feel about Brian's books. Tell us how you really feel. The Gash Grab of Dune, Part 23. There are 30 some odd books. That's pushing it. I will grant you that. I had a hard enough time with the core 6 ones, to be fair. I read them when I was a teenager. There were places they kind of drug, and there were places they got really weird. And yeah, I got the feeling you don't really care for them. Just saying. Okay, so we're going to look at the Sietch. It is a longer video. Like, you're gonna have to kind of keep an eye on your own volume on that one, because once I started, I can't adjust it anymore. So I do apologize for that. So let me see if I can show it. Media player. Allow. Fingers crossed I made the buttons work the first time. Woo! Okay. Are we ready to look at the Sietch? Is that flickering again? That's my camera. That's my my USB's going out. So now let us look at. So we've been following these trials of Aquil. They are to teach young Fremen what they need to know to pass into heaven, to pass into adulthood, to be responsible adults, to know that where they come from. The Fremen find it very important, even with the poison drug and now the spice, that only because it's a woman only thing, but they find it very, very important to remember. We have to remember where we were. We have to remember not to be soft, otherwise the universe will kick our butts again. And we, as the chosen of God, have to be ready for the war at the end of the universe. So that's our duty, and we have to remember that we have to hold down to that. We have to pet it and feed it and name it George, and hold that pain, that suffering to us, because that's who we are. We've been honed by God to survive. So we cannot forget that, because Arrakis is suffering. So let us run into the Sietch. Most of the Sietches we know around this area no longer exist. If you've been to, was it Sietch Tarl? That one's been caved in. I think it's Sietch Tarl. But I also noticed that it's full of Mas Kharet stuff. Yeah, I'm wearing a shield in the Sietch because they're wearing a shield in the Sietch. Freaking Mas Kharet. I'm not a Fremen. And neither are they. But yeah, I've noticed that even though they haven't gotten in the door, the Mas Kharet have moved in. I wanted to kind of show off the interior of it a little bit. But yeah, those lights always remind me of Star Wars. This is the hard part about a live game, trying to record stuff. I always forget to keep my mouse moved out of the way. Oops. I think it's more experience after a bit. There we go. Oops. I found the buttons. One last place of suffering. That does not narrow it down. Okay, I wanted to pause here because it is a long video and I didn't want to forget stuff, so I made notes. Yeah. So all the manuscripts has been moved in. Something I discovered, it was another. So the Kitab al-Libar is also known as the Book of Tears. So this is kind of a history book of where we've been and our trail, so to speak. We talked a bit before about the different planets. So when it says people of Mir, that's a Fremen word for, it's kind of a misnomer. The Mir are also the people. So the Zinsuni call themselves the people, and their first planet that they came from, the first place they've got listed there is Nilotic al-Ruba, which means people of the Nile. So it's talking about where they probably came from on Old Terra. So they are the people from North Africa. So that explains their Islamic roots. Their linguistic roots are Arabic and Islamic, which we knew from the Zinsuni thing. Probably the Nile Valley. Then we went to Poitrin. Then Seleucus Secundus, which we all know is such a happy, cheerful place. They should have never left. It's this paradise for everybody, right? Betelgeuse, they didn't give a whole lot of detail about. It's one of the many planets that they've forgotten. And keep in mind, they didn't necessarily go in mass all at once from planet to planet. They splitting up, maybe going to other places, maybe going back to places. So there's lots of wandering over those long periods of time. And we know from the show that they did, the Bene Gesserit show, the prophecy, that the Fremen have been, that's 10,000 years ago. The Fremen are firmly entrenched here on Arrakis. So we know all of that stuff happened a very long time ago. A very, very long time ago. Then we went to Rosek with the poison drug, which would give the sorceresses, which became the Sayadina, that memory, so they could see the memory of people the women in their history, which would be a huge thing for people who did things from memory, who had an oral tradition. But also reinforced the idea that women hold the mythic power. Men take the poison drug and die. They go nuts and die. And so women hold the memory. Women would hold that mystery. And I don't know, this is where Joel would be handy to have, who could, which came first, the Sayadina or the Bene Gesserit? And but the Sayadina had figured it out as well. The Sayadina knew about the memory. They would have known about eventually, sooner than later, they would have known about the abominations. So they were not some ignorant bunch of savages. They had their own thing going by the time they got to Rosik. And if you watch the prophecy, they used the poison a little bit. They were still figuring it out to tap into that ancestral memory. And then from Mosek, we went to Thurgrod and then to Hamontep, which we know was more suffering, the slave cribs. And then we came to Arrakis. Yehoiachin was Long Live the Fighters. And I have to wonder, we know we aren't the sleeper. All right, we saw that in the trailer. You're not the sleeper. Could we be a Mahdi? Could we be a wise person? Are we? What is our purpose here? What is our place trying to find the Fremen? Um, the voice tells us to go and seek our Ummah, which is our prophet, our leader. Um, it's our time to kind of move forward with our spiritual understanding of the universe. Um, so this is actually pretty important, and this is really the fine tiny print. So I'm gonna take my glasses off. In the books and in the movie, when we see Stilgar picks up Jessica and Paul, Jessica convinces Stilgar to take them because she is Saidina, but he's still a little on Paul, right? He's like, is he too old to learn? Is he, could he be useful to us? Saidina, we gotta kind of keep, but Paul, And when Jessica and Paul are fleeing Arakeen and meet with Stilgar's troops, they have this exchange. Paul hid his anger in his voice. My name is Paul. It were well you will give you a name, manling, Stilgar said, in the time of Minra and at the test of Aquil. So you get to be a grown-up when we say you get to be a grown-up. When you finish this trial process, then we'll give you a grown-up name. The test of reason, Jessica translates, the trial of Aquil is a test of thinking of reason, of being a grown-up. The sudden need of Paul's ascendancy overrode her consideration, and she barked, my son's been tested by the Gom Jabbar. In the stillness that followed, she knew she had struck to the heart of them. There's much we don't know of each other, said Stilgar. So Paul gets to skip the trials because he got the Gom Jabbar. He's passed the test of reason. He is a man. He's not a child. He's not someone to be discounted. And Stilgar's like, okay, being the pragmatic guy that he is. But having already passed the Gom Jabbar also puts it in that tick box into movie Stilgar of Lisan al-Gaib. So he's seeing that as it's a sign of being the voice from the outer world. Presto loves that pineapple pizza. You got to grill it first, is the thing. Just throwing some fresh or even canned pineapple on it, it's going to be gross. She's a little easily swayed. It concerns me. She's a bit naive for an acolyte. Pizza a la tiramisu. Ew. 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 So I find she doesn't lie. I'm a scholar of Fremen culture. She's a hobbyist. Her job is acolyte to her mother, and it wasn't obvious. I mean, not everybody knows the lore, and if it helps, I used to work with a lady who we knew as Trish, right? And someone coming in looking for Pat, and I'm like, "There's no Pat here. There's no Pat here." And he's like, "No, there's a Pat Dalian here." I'm like, "No, we have a Trish Dalian, but no Pat Dalian." And it was like, Patricia, like, She thought it was hilarious that we didn't clock that it was the same name. But yeah, poor rich kid slumming with the locals. I'm sure her mother loves it when she goes slumming. Just absolutely loves it. So that's what it looks like, not despoiled from the Mas Kharet, not moving all of their junk in. I did have kind of a little thing that has kind of irked me about this. Is they do see the worm as an embodiment of God, right? Blessed be the Maker, may His pass and cleanse the world. But they had that belief before they got to Arrakis that there was a God that was testing them, and he's also not an apex mega predator. Shai Hulud is a filter feeder. They're like whales. They're not an apex predator. There's no other things there. From if they were eating each other, then they might be a mega predator. But they're not apex. Whales aren't mega predators. They're not a mega predator. So this makes me wonder. Joel doesn't make mistakes, so it makes me question what science they're working from as a character, and question her. I want to say education. It sounds rude, but her perspectives on things. If they believe Shai-Hulud does create life, but it doesn't make it a mega predator, because the life cycle of Shai-Hulud, right? It creates all the sand, but there's also the sand trout which move the water around, and the whole bacterial, not bacteria, mycelia thing with the spice, make the spice blows, and that there's a whole life cycle thing that it's very complicated, but the actual worm itself is not they're filter feeders. That's what all the teeth are for. They're not to bite people. They're if they eat you, it's because you are annoying them. They don't deliberately go nom people. It's just you're really annoying them. The shields turn them into the frenzy. The 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 rhythmic stuff bugs them, so they eat the thing that bothers them, but they aren't deliberately hunting people for food. Their food is essentially plankton in the sand. They're filter feeders. Although we do talk about other mega apex predators later with some sharks. So they're swatting you away because you're annoying the fuck out of them, and I can't blame them. Especially the shield, the Holtzman deck is supposed to be very painful for them. They're sensitive little babies, and oops, sorry. I want these all things as decorations. We want the jugs and the rugs and the pillows. And the bookshelves and the scrolls. Drama queens. That's funny. One thing I forgot to get in this video is if you go down into the in that first area and you go down in the bottom, there's one of the little light things, and Ari tells you that would be essentially where the big water reservoir would have been. So that would have been filled with water. We saw that in the Sietch with Stilgar. I like how they gave you lots of little bit of salvage metal in case you didn't bring a cutter with you. You could make one because it's just granite you have to cut through. But yeah, cutter ray is a tool I always bring. Compactor. So much drama. It is very easy to get turned around here. I think I've run this so many times. Every time I go through, I'm like, damn it, I missed that one. I also don't like how she gets in between you and the camera. There was someone complaining about the DLC. They got stuck in one of the DLC labs because they didn't bring a cutaway with them. Also, so she mentions here that the Fremen used to keep scorpions for their poison. Joel has said that they are looking at ways on how to introduce more localized animals to Arrakis for us. And I'm like, better not be some giant ass scorpion running around the bottom of the rift. I don't need that. I don't need that. I survived the DLCs. I don't need uh, giant peoples with scorpions, or even the big ones or the little ones in the gin. I don't need those. I absolutely don't need those. I wasn't gonna judge the person who didn't bring a cutter ray, but I'm like, seriously, who leaves the house without one? There's just some tools, and now these days, a scanner. Just don't leave home without one. Just don't leave home without one. Only the small ones if they give us a stomping, the ability to stomp on things. Sorry, I'm trying to get the video thing off the screen. Ari, move! I can't see through you. No, see, that's why we shouldn't get the stomping thing. Okay. Please tell me I go back. Oh, I missed a bunch. So, yeah, because I'm dumb. Hold on. Oh, no, do I go back? Okay. I could have swore I double checked this. Excuse me. Little something about the Sardaukar. So what that tells us, though, the Sardaukar, um, the Sardaukar are the ones that poison bodies. How many bodies do we find all over the map in all kinds of places that have been booby trapped? When you're going to the seventh trial, if you start at the top of the rift and go down the shaft that way and climb down, there's a blueprint there. I found the Mark III Emperor's Wings there once, but that the body is booby trapped. So we know it's not the Fremen booby trapping bodies; it's the Sardaukar booby trapping bodies. So yeah. We already have the poison mist sword. Hello, hey, and hope you enjoyed your day out. Yep, we're still here. Yeah, that main reservoir is in that first room down underneath. No, we don't stomp on the instant hydration would just be goo on your boot. You. What is wrong with you, you monster? Nutella churro does sound nice. It's for the best it's impassable for us to get to the armory, and I have to wonder what's in there that it's best we don't get. I genuinely don't think I've ever killed a Moadib. And I've never cooked any. All the spice food and drink that I have found. I think my current character addiction level is 6. I should stop, but I don't want to stop. You can cook spice food if you open up your inventory, your screen where you spend the points to learn how to do stuff. It's the one that's the second to the right. You can make the spice coffee and spice drinks and things. You totally can. Also, only sort of related. Anybody know who this guy is? The Salido projection. That would be one of the kinds. I believe it's kind senior. Yep. It would make sense that it would be one of the kinds teaching planetology. The Fremen had started some terraforming, but weren't going. It wasn't really well organized until kinds came along. I think it's Pardo. I think it's kind senior. I find it interesting you spend all this time learning about basic Fremen history. And then once you do that, then you get a crash course in planetology. And those things are required to have your future open to you. Yeah, the Bene Gesserit. I think that the Bene Gesserit trainer is on the track of trying to sort that out and understanding that there was it doesn't end all be all with the Bene Gesserit influence. And there's really no rush to finish any of the content. I know some people don't even finish the trials because they found them boring and then they wonder why there's no story. And I'm like, because you didn't do it. Um, graphic novels. If you're not a big reader, graphic novels. So those white ones are the graphic novels for the house books. and I can't see them really well on that side, but that's the core books, the graphic novels. There's also some really good audiobooks. They get a little weird. Okay, that's just to say they're getting heavy is the thing. They get really weird. Um, and I think it gives evidence to the idea that Frank Herbert was on drugs. People go, was he? I'm like, I would be willing to bet yes. And also had some views that, yeah. So you now have the knowledge of a Fremen pre-adolescent. So they send children off on these trials. Children have to find their way around the Haga Basin to go do those things. But yeah, I would be willing to bet Herbert was done shrooms. He had a thing for understanding mycelia. It would make sense. So Pardo Kynes had lived in a sietch in the southern pole, where they were doing a lot of terraforming there because water was slightly more accessible. And what they were doing is they were essentially going into the caves and trying to grow things there to break up soil and condense moisture. And there was a bad accident at one point. They were a little too successful, and all the moisture that they had collected inside the cave caused the cave to collapse. So Pardo Kynes had a very close personal relationship with the Fremen and trying to help them become independent to live in that green paradise. That was take them to paradise wasn't just a mythos for them. It was they wanted to. They were just dependent on the spice as they didn't want to go anywhere. Why would they needed to travel? They don't care. They just want to be left alone. And in doing that, they wanted to have that paradise they had suffered for. So Kynes offered them a means to have something because the suffering gets old. It gets real old. And all of the closed off spaces there on the edges, where people would have lived and worked. It they talked Shawnee mentioned it in the movie, the using religion as a means for control, to tell you it's okay to suffer now. It's best not to resist because the more you suffer now, the better your heaven will be later. And it tricks people into accepting being treated a certain way that they should not be treated. And to tell you that suffering makes you holy or worthy of things, and is a way that they were creating this malleable people. And you're right, it does create a stagnation because you have people who just sit back and wait for, we're going to wait however long for at least an Al Gaib to come because we can't save ourselves. And it makes them manipulable, which isn't good. Yeah, every time there's a time, everything, there, there's a reason for everything. All of those things are, we look at them as ways to try and sometimes bring comfort to things, but sometimes they are not helpful to a people that have been abused. To tell a subjugated, colonized people, your suffering will bring you peace later. It's been 10,000 years. How long do they have to wait? That is one big death still. I'm kind of glad the ones that we can build are not nearly so complicated. Can you imagine having to do this every time you throw a body into a death still? That would be awful. It would take up so much room. Can you imagine? Have faith if you're watching. Don't do it. And then the door opens. I know. Can you imagine, the power requirements for that? So he came here with the same directive that we have, which was find the Fremen, wake the sleeper. Only he got lucky and actually found the Fremen. But apparently the sleeper is still you know. But I wanted to kind of scroll back and look at something really quickly. So we come into this room, right? And then the camera pans up, and that is a lot of tech. Now we know that they had the extensive power systems to run all of the things. We know that they had, the water pumps and the wind traps, and but that's a lot of there's a lot of tech in here. And just looking at the room, when we think of Fremen and what we've seen in the movies and the shows and whatever, this is pretty atypical of what we would expect to find in a siege. We don't think of them as techie people. The more complicated something is, the more likely it is to break. And the keep it simple, keep it portable, keep it something we can easily fix on our own without needing off-world supplies. Xantera told us back in the beginning that the Fremen could do a lot with very little. The Imperium, those wrecks that we go into the PvP areas for materials, those are, he said, take the plunder from all of the world. So we have the only places to get those things typically are the wrecks, or we recycle weapons that would have been made with those parts. We can't, those are the main places to find those parts. You have to go there to get them. They're not naturally occurring here. This isn't tech that the Fremen would have had access to, and yet they have that's a lot of tech. And they have a hollow projector recorder thing, and we never saw in the movies or whatever. This is not tech that the Fremen would be using. So, and Xantera was like, this is not tech that they would have been using. He's already told you that this is not typical stuff. And so let's jump ahead. But yeah, he's looking for the Fremen. Also, he found the Fremen, but he still has, there's still stuff he has to do. The Sardaukar are following him. And then he wishes you peace as he runs out the door. But there's something about, he says that you're like the door, like the death still, your blood is the key. Ari tells us that the doors are Fremen biocoded, but we also know that she calls Shai-Hulud an apex mega predator. So my belief in her authority is a little and we know that while she's saying, and what he said, that he found it despoiled, we know that it was the Sardaukar that did this recently-ish, much more recently than the last 10,000 years. This was in use not long ago. So the program, I mean, the Harkonnens moved in 80 years ago. Ari has been on Arrakis for 10 years at this point. So it hasn't been that long ago that the Fremen were in this room. Were they actively using this tech? Don't know. But they had access to it, and they had access to the room. So for the uninitiated, the planet Ix was a technology planet. When her father was a young man, the Ixian planet, their goal was to build a highliner that would be more fuel efficient or hold more space wise to be not necessarily competitive with the guild, but to be competitive with the guild, which the guild did not appreciate. Um, there was some political fallout from that, and then the Talaxu were allowed to take over Ix. Uh, so now we know and using that tech, we know the Talaxu were already pretty techy, and so they had access to the Ixian tech, and now there's kind of this overlap of sneaky tech. The Talaxu are very, very sneaky. They probably push the tenets of the Butlerian Jihad regularly, but people look the other way because they're useful. Things like the growing the eyes and all of those sorts of things. There's a whole lot of sneaky stuff, but you can't prove anything. And to try and prove things would expose yourself. So everybody's got their secrets. Everybody's got their secrets. They're not openly operating in violation of the tenets of the jihad, but you know that there's some sneaky dealings going on. And for those of you who are familiar with the books, I had to look this one up because it's been a while. Tufir Hawat had told that to Paul at one point. You know, leaving a place, one place is as good another. We only miss people, not places. If we don't look, we won't find any problems. Pretty much, yeah. There's a whole lot of no one wants to look too closely because everybody's got their fingers in that particular pie, and that's particularly dangerous. But yeah, parting with friends is a sadness. A place is only a place. To fear, that's one of his lines. So he also taught Ari like he did um, Paul. I don't. So we know she's got some Bene Gesserit training because her mother. So we know she's spent some time with Tufir Hawat. We don't know if she spent much time with Gurney or Duncan at this point, like Paul had done. But yeah, she's had a similar upbringing, probably more militant than most women her age uh, and her station. So she's saying she's going to miss hanging out with. She's going to miss this encounter, even though she just met you. Yeah, there's a whole lot of tech in this room. So the question is where did it come from? And how did they keep it hidden all this time? Not an heir the same way, no, because she can't inherit the same way as if she had been born a boy. Which probably is a lot of her mother's upbringing. Her mother would have definitely made sure she was raised more ladylike, despite being raised as a Bene Gesserit. I just realized something. Back in the 80s, there was a movie with Sylvester Stallone and Dolly Parton. And the gist of it was she ran a country western bar thing in New York. And there was a contest to see if you could turn somebody into a country singer. And she ended up having to train Sylvester Stallone how to do country, whatever. And they were trying to get him to walk like he was in the country, country western cowboy type. And he was really struggling from New Yorker cabbie to cowboy walk. And one of the things they kept telling him is walk like you got jock itch. And I just noticed this guy walking in. I was like, he's probably had some chafing, but he's just walking like he's knees out, chafing itch. I've seen this so many times at it that just now clicked to me that he's walking that way. But yes, it's yeah, tight pants and all. And that song that he sang in the movie, Budweiser, you created a monster, and they call him Drinkenstein. It was so bad. And I gotta wait for them to catch up. They nerfed this really quite a bit. This used to be a lot harder. Rhinestone, yes. I found it interesting that I don't know if they bugged out, but they weren't using shields for some reason. They should have been shielded. I don't know. Not that I'm complaining. So they used to be really, really tough. But the idea that the Mas Kharet were a Fremen wannabe cult, they thought the Fremen were too weak, and so we're going to make new Fremen, and we're going to make them tougher and more bloodthirsty. And I obviously haven't killed anybody yet. LARPers. But yeah, they to them the Fremen were not strong enough. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been wiped out. But really, I mean, we saw in the movie and in the books the idea when the Atreides arrived, they were under the belief there were only a few thousand Fremen, and they had been holding out against the Harkonnens all this time, and that's why Leto was wanting to learn more about them to get that desert power. People who had been able to withstand and hold with minimal tech. They don't have an army, a standing army. They're not united. They don't have air forces or any of that stuff. But they've managed to hold um, against the Harkonnens. And buttons. Which buttons do I want? That's not the button I want. That's not the button I want. Damn it. God damn it. Okay, let's go with that one. So he'd been under the impression there was only a few of them, but they had been able to hold out for the last 80 years against the Harkonnens. So the idea that there were more of them never occurred to him. The Mas Kharet consider they are also ignorant of where the Fremen are. They assumed they were also wiped out. But we also know that they had all moved south because the Fremen were using spice to bribe the smugglers who aren't at Windsack to hide their locations from the weather satellites. Now, the weather satellites would definitely be a thing. You can't just start knocking weather satellites out of the air because you got to know when the storms are coming, where they're going. But to hide the movements from those satellites, from wiping data or whatever. So the Fremen were already, they knew the smugglers. The smugglers were working against the Harkonnens. What's the name of the woman in Harko who calls everybody kitten? What's her name? Her father was a smuggler who lived at the pole and was a pain in the Harkonnen side to the point where he was invited to the dinner party, And Leto was like, we'll look the other way to your activities as long as you continue being a pain in the Harkonnen side. So the smugglers, as far as a faction in lore, are already in play. Because I genuinely think that they're going to be part of the third faction, or at least I think they're going to come in at some point, because they play too big a part in lore to not play a part. And Elara's father was a big time smuggler. That's why when you ask her about the smugglers when you first meet her, she's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Who would call themselves a smuggler? Why would you do that? There's no some unified group of people running around calling themselves smugglers. But I'm pretty sure, and it would make sense because they are against the Harkonnens. They know where the Fremen are. They know where some of the Sietches are, if nothing else. So it would make sense that because they're part of what kept the Fremen alive. And even in the book, Tufir was impressed with the smugglers and all that sort of thing. So, and what they've been able to accomplish with what they had, which is a whole lot of sneaky. But so yeah, we just finished chapter 1, I guess, act 1, whatever they're calling it now. Which is basically an introduction for people who don't know anything about the lore. There's a bunch of people who came just for survival games, but also the importance of why we need to find the Fremen. Who are they? What part do they play in the scope of things? At one point, Ari tells you, the Imperial reach here is pretty small, and but then this guy just tells you, this goes deep into the heart of the Imperium. There's a big thing going on here. So Ari doesn't know everything. There's a whole lot of intrigue and plots within plots, and yeah, there's a lot of stuff.